Commander Vex-9 clicked his mandibles in what passed for amusement among the Catherian High Command. The holographic display before him showed the latest intelligence reports from Sector 47, and frankly he was having trouble believing what his sensors were telling him. A single human had somehow managed to not only survive on Mortinus Prime for 17 standard cycles, but was apparently thriving there. "Sir," Lieutenant Crowell 7's voice crackled through the communication array, her tone carrying that particular mix of confusion and disbelief that Vex had been hearing a lot lately. "The bioreadings are, well, they are impossible." "Define impossible, Lieutenant." Vex leaned back in his command chair, which creaked ominously under his exoskeleton. The Catherians had built their ships to last, not to be comfortable. The human designated as Marcus Vale is currently engaged in what our translation matrices are calling morning exercises on the northern continent of Mortinus Prime. He appears to be running for pleasure. Vex's secondary eyes twitched. Running for pleasure? On a world where the atmospheric pressure could crush most species' lungs, where the gravity was 3 times standard, and where the native wildlife considered everything else to be either prey or a territorial threat. "Show me," he commanded. The main view screen flickered to life, displaying a real-time feed from their cloaked surveillance drone. What Vex saw made his breathing apparatus wheeze in what might have been laughter if Catherians were capable of such an emotion. There was Marcus Vale, a specimen of humanity that stood roughly 2 meters tall, jogging along what appeared to be a cliff face. Not next to a cliff face, on the cliff face. Vertical. His bipedal form moved with an efficiency that would have impressed Vex if he wasn't so busy being horrified. The human was using some sort of primitive climbing gear, metal spikes that he drove into the rock face with casual precision, hauling himself upward with movements that suggested this was routine. "Temperature readings, Lieutenant?" 47 degrees Celsius in direct sunlight, sir. The human appears to be sweating." "Of course he is," Vex muttered. "Humans are the only species we have encountered that actively leaks coolant as a survival mechanism. It's disgusting." What was even more disgusting was how effective it seemed to be. Marcus reached a ledge roughly 50 meters up the cliff, and paused to drink from what appeared to be a water container. Even from this distance, the surveillance drone's audio pickups caught him humming something. Humming, as if scaling a death cliff was some sort of recreational activity. "Sir," Pralal's voice carried a note of barely contained panic now. "He's looking directly at our drone." Vex's attention snapped back to the screen. Sure enough, Marcus Vale had turned his head skyward and was staring directly at their cloaked surveillance unit. The human's facial features were partially obscured by some sort of protective eyewear, but his mouth was curved in what Vex recognized as a human expression of amusement. Then Marcus did something that made Vex's hemolymph run cold. He waved. "How?" Kowal whispered. "The drone is cloaked. Our stealth technology is the most advanced in the galaxy." "Apparently not advanced enough," Vex replied grimly. "Human sensory capabilities have always been unusual." That was putting it mildly. Humans seem to possess an almost supernatural ability to detect things that should have been undetectable. The Galactic Intelligence Database was full of reports about human soldiers who could somehow sense incoming attacks, human pilots who could navigate asteroid fields that would pulverize any sane being, and human engineers who could fix technology they'd never seen before just by listening to the sounds it made. Marcus finished his water, secured the container to his equipment harness, and continued his vertical jog as if nothing had happened. Vex watched in fascination as the human reached the top of the cliff, where he was immediately confronted by something that made even the hardened Kytherian commander's mandibles clench in sympathetic terror. A Mortinus stalker. 3 meters of crystalline scaled death, with enough venom in its bite to kill a battalion of Catherian soldiers, and claws that could shred through battle armor like tissue paper. The creature's 6 eyes fixed on Marcus with predatory intelligence, and its tail lashed with enough force to crack stone. "Kolar, are you recording this?" "Yes, sir. But should we intervene?" "That creature will—" Her voice trailed off as they watched Marcus do something completely unexpected. He sat down, right there on the cliff edge. With a massive predator less than 10 meters away, the human simply sat down and began removing something from his pack. "What is he doing?" Vex demanded. The drone's sensors identified the object as Marcus pulled it free. "Food, sir. He appears to be eating lunch." The stalker, clearly as confused as the watching aliens, approached cautiously. Its sensory organs flared as it tested the air, trying to determine if this strange bipedal creature was prey, predator, or something else entirely. Marcus ignored it completely, focusing on what appeared to be some sort of wrapped nutritional supplement. Then the human did something that violated every known principle of predator-prey dynamics in the galaxy. He tossed a portion of his food toward the stalker. "Oh, for the love of the void," Vex breathed. "He's trying to feed it." The stalker sniffed the offered food suspiciously, its poison sacs visibly swelling as it prepared to strike. Then it took a bite, and another. Within moments, the apex predator of Mortanes Prime was sitting next to Marcus Vale like some sort of oversized pet, accepting food offerings and making what the drone's audio pickups identified as purring sounds. "Sir." Sir's voice was now barely a whisper. "The stalker appears to be enjoying itself." "I can see that, Lieutenant." Vex's mandibles clicked rapidly, a sure sign of agitation. "Any theories on how a human managed to domesticate a creature that has killed 14 research teams? Perhaps he's not trying to domesticate it, sir. Perhaps he's just sharing his meal?" Sharing. As if sharing food with an apex predator was a perfectly reasonable thing to do. Vex had read the human behavioral reports. Of course, the species seemed to have an inexplicable tendency to attempt friendship with anything that didn't immediately try to kill them, and sometimes even things that did try to kill them. "Pull up his file again," Vex ordered. The display split, showing Marcus Vale's military record alongside the live feed. Human male, age 32, standard years, formerly of the Terran Defense Force Special Operations Division, combat veteran of the Centauri conflicts, the vegan border wars, and something called the Australian Survival Training Program, which apparently involved dropping human soldiers into hostile environments on their own homeworld and seeing if they could survive. And survive they did. According to the records, Marcus had not only completed the program but had set several endurance records that still stood. The human had spent 6 months alone in something called the Outback, living off the land and avoiding creatures with names like drop bears, funnel web spiders, and cassowaries. "Sir," Call interrupted his reading, "you need to see this." Vex looked back at the main screen and immediately wished he hadn't. Marcus had finished his meal and was now engaged in what appeared to be some sort of play behavior with the stalker. The massive predator was rolling on its back while the human scratched its belly scales, producing sounds of contentment that the drone's computers were having trouble categorizing. "That thing could disembowel him with a casual swipe," Vex observed. "Yes, sir, but it appears to be more interested in belly rubs." Belly rubs. Vex made a mental note to have his intelligence officers review their threat assessments for Mortanes Prime wildlife. Clearly there were variables they hadn't considered. Marcus stood up, shouldered his pack, and gave the stalker what appeared to be a farewell pat on the head. The creature watched him go with what could only be described as disappointment, then curled up in the sun for what was obviously a post-meal nap. "Where is he going now?" Vex wondered aloud. The answer became apparent as Marcus approached what their geological surveys had identified as one of the most dangerous areas on the planet. The Screaming Valleys, so named because the wind patterns through the razor-sharp rock formations created sounds that could drive most sentient species insane. The human, however, seemed to be heading directly into them. "Sir, should we warn him? Those formations are unstable and the acoustic effects—" "I don't think warnings would be particularly effective at this point, Lieutenant." They watched as Marcus paused at the valley entrance and pulled out what appeared to be a small device. The drone's sensors identified it as a primitive audio reproduction unit. A moment later, sound waves began emanating from the device, competing with the natural screaming of the wind through the rocks. Is he playing music?" Kyle asked. It would appear so. The human was indeed playing music, something with a heavy rhythmic beat that seemed to complement rather than clash with the valley's natural acoustics. Marcus began moving through the treacherous terrain with fluid grace, timing his movements to the rhythm he'd created. When the natural rock formations threatened to collapse under his weight, he danced around them. When the wind patterns shifted to create particularly disorienting acoustic effects, he simply turned up his music louder. "How is he doing that?" Vex demanded. "Those formations should have collapsed the moment he set foot in there." "I believe he's using the music to predict the harmonic frequencies, sir. He's moving in sync with the natural resonance patterns, avoiding the points where his weight would create destructive interference." Vex stared at his lieutenant. Are you telling me this human is dancing his way through a geological death trap? That would be an accurate assessment. Yes, sir. It was official. Humans were completely insane. Marcus emerged from the screaming valleys 3 hours later, apparently none the worse for wear. His clothing was dusty and his equipment showed signs of minor damage. But he was humming again. Always with the humming. New contact approaching his position, Chartrawler reported. Mortanis Prime Indigenous Lifeform Classification. Oh no. What now? Acid Serpent, sir. Category 5 Predator. 30 meters long, capable of dissolving most known materials with its saliva. On the screen, a creature that looked like something out of a nightmare slithered into view. Its scales shifted color to match the surrounding rock, and steam rose from where its acidic secretions touched the ground. The acid serpent was one of the few creatures on Mortanis Prime that even the stalkers avoided. Marcus stopped walking and observed the creature with what appeared to be professional interest. He reached into his pack and withdrew something that made Vex's breathing apparatus stutter. Is that what I think it is? Antibiotics, sir. Standard Terran military issue. The human walked directly toward the acid serpent, which reared up in obvious threat display. 30 meters of chemically enhanced death towered over Marcus Vale, preparing to dissolve him into component atoms. The human, completely ignoring the threat, continued forward until he was within striking distance. Then he knelt down and began examining the creature's underside. He's lost his mind, Vex concluded. The atmospheric pressure has finally affected his brain chemistry. But Marcus wasn't acting crazy. He was acting like a medic. The drone's enhanced sensors picked up what the human had apparently spotted with his naked eyes. An infected wound on the serpent's belly, probably from a territorial dispute with another predator. The antibiotics, designed for human physiology, shouldn't have been effective on an alien life form. Shouldn't have been, but apparently were. The acid serpent's posture shifted from aggressive to merely cautious as Marcus applied the medication to its wound. The creature's natural aggression seemed to fade as the infection began to clear, replaced by something that looked remarkably like gratitude. Sir, Crawler's voice was now barely audible. Request permission to revise our threat assessment protocols. Denied, Vex replied automatically. If we start revising our protocols every time a human does something impossible, we will never have any protocols left. Marcus finished treating the serpent and stepped back. The massive creature regarded him for a long moment, then did something that would haunt Vex's dreams for cycles to come. It bowed. A 30-meter killing machine actually bowed to a bipedal primate from a backwater planet. Then it slithered away, leaving Marcus standing alone in what should have been a radioactive wasteland. End of shift, sir? Bywell asked hopefully. Not quite. Vex pulled up the evening schedule for Mortanis Prime. According to our planetary rotation calculations, he's got about 6 more hours of daylight. I want to see what else he's planning to befriend. The answer, as it turned out, was everything. Over the next several hours, they watched Marcus Vale systematically violate every known principle of survival on hostile worlds. He shared his water with something called a crystal mite, whose bite was supposed to cause instant paralysis. He played fetch with a pack of void hunters using a stick and apparently having the time of his life. He even spent an hour teaching a group of plasma wasps to fly in formation, using hand signals and what appeared to be genuine enthusiasm. By the time Mortanis Prime's 3 suns began to set, painting the sky in shades of violence, Marcus had essentially established diplomatic relations with half the planet's ecosystem. As he set up his campsite for the night, he was surrounded by creatures that should have been competing to see who got to eat him first. Instead, they formed a protective perimeter. Sir, Berlal said, and Vex could hear the exhaustion in her voice. I have been monitoring his vital signs sound day. His stress levels haven't spiked once. Not once. He's been more relaxed today than most beings are in their own homes. Maybe because he considers this home, Vex suggested. The thought was disturbing on multiple levels. According to Marcus's file, he'd been stationed on Mortanis Prime as part of a punishment detail, some sort of disciplinary action, following an incident involving an unauthorized rescue mission that had saved 300 civilian lives but violated direct orders in the process. The Terran Defense Force had essentially exiled him to what they considered a certain death. Pull up the communication logs, Vex ordered. I want to see his last transmission to Earth. The file appeared on a secondary screen. Marcus's final report to his commanding officers, sent just after he'd arrived on Mortanis Prime 17 cycles ago. Command, this is Sergeant Marcus Vale reporting from Mortanis Prime. Deployment successful, no injuries during landing. Initial assessment of local conditions, challenging but manageable. Terrain reminds me of home, actually. Specifically, it reminds me of that time you guys dropped me in the middle of the Gibson Desert with nothing but a knife and a water bottle. At least this place has better wildlife. Weather is consistent, gravity is good for strength training, and the local fauna seems relatively friendly once you get to know them. Request permission to extend tour of duty indefinitely. This beats sitting behind a desk filling out incident reports. Vel out. The transmission was 17 cycles old. In all that time, there had been no request for extraction, no distress calls, and no indication that Marcus considered his situation anything other than an extended camping trip. Sir, Quirrell said quietly, what are we going to tell High Command? Vex considered this. The Catherian Empire had been planning to establish a military base on Mortanis Prime for 3 standard years. The planet's location made it strategically valuable, and its hostile environment would provide excellent training conditions for their special forces. The only problem had been the native wildlife, which had killed every survey team they'd sent. Now they had proof that the planet was not only habitable but actually pleasant, provided you were completely insane and had no sense of self-preservation. We are going to tell them the truth, Vex decided. One human has successfully colonized a Class 5 Deathworld using nothing but standard field equipment and the apparent ability to make friends with anything that breathes. And if they ask for recommendations? Vex watched as Marcus settled down by his campfire surrounded by creatures that would give nightmares to seasoned warriors. The human was reading something, probably a book, knowing humans and their inexplicable fondness for primitive information storage. Several of his new friends had curled up nearby, apparently content to serve as living security systems. I'm going to recommend we find a different planet, Vex said finally. Preferably one that hasn't been claimed by a lunatic who thinks acid-spitting serpents make good neighbors. As if summoned by his words, the communication array crackled to life. Marcus Vale's voice filled the command center, transmitted through their surveillance network. Hey there, mysterious alien observers.
Yeah, I can see your drone.
Has been watching me all day, just wanted to say thanks for keeping an eye on things, but you really don't need to worry. Everything here is perfectly safe. Vax and Quirrell exchanged glances. How does he know we are aliens? Quirrell whispered. Marcus's voice continued, carrying what humans called humor. Unless you are planning to visit, in which case you might want to bring some snacks. The locals get cranky when they are hungry, and trust me, you don't want to meet a cranky stalker. Oh, and maybe bring some medical supplies. I have been doing my best with first aid, but some of these guys need proper veterinary care. The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in stunned silence. Sir, Quirrell said eventually, I think we need to send a bigger drone. No, Vex replied, already composing his report to High Command. I think we need to send a completely different species, one with better survival instincts. As Mortanis Prime rotated into night, the surveillance drone continued its vigil. Marcus Vale banked his campfire, bid goodnight to his collection of lethal companions, and settled into what appeared to be a comfortable sleep. The sounds of the planet's nocturnal predators formed a lullaby that would have terrified most spacefaring species. The human, however, was snoring. End of shift? Quirrell asked again, more hopefully this time. Not yet, Vex replied, settling back in his command chair. I want to see what happens when the nighttime hunters come out to play. What happened, as it turned out, was that they joined the campfire circle. Within an hour, Marcus was surrounded by creatures whose names read like a catalog of cosmic horror: shadow rippers, phase stalkers, nightmare crawlers, and something the planetary survey had simply designated as unknown hostile entity number 7. All of them had apparently decided that the warmest, safest place on the entire planet was within 3 meters of a sleeping human. Sir, Quirrell's voice carried a note of desperate confusion. According to our biological data, those creatures should be in the middle of a feeding frenzy right now. It's prime hunting time for all of them. Maybe they are full, Vex suggested weakly. Nightmare crawlers don't get full, sir. They consume energy rather than matter. They should be draining his life force as we speak. On the screen, one of the nightmare crawlers had curled up against Marcus's side like an oversized cat. The creature's natural energy-draining abilities seemed to be working in reverse, actually providing warmth rather than stealing it. Marcus, still deeply asleep, absently reached out and scratched behind what might have been the creature's equivalent of ears. The nightmare crawler purred. "That's it," Vex announced. "I'm requesting a transfer to a different sector, preferably one where the laws of physics still apply." "Sir, you can't abandon your post just because a human is making friends with impossible creatures. Watch me." But even as he said it, Vex knew he wouldn't leave. This was too interesting, too completely absurd to walk away from. Besides, someone had to document this for posterity. Future generations needed to know that somewhere in the galaxy, there was a species so completely divorced from common sense that they could turn a death world into a nature preserve through the sheer power of oblivious friendliness. The night shift was going to be very, very long. 3 cycles later, Commander Vex 9 was seriously considering early retirement. Not because of his age, not because of the stress of military service, but because watching Marcus Vale go about his daily routine was slowly driving him insane. "Morning report, Lieutenant Krull," he said, settling into his command chair with the resigned air of someone about to witness another impossibility. "Sir, the human has constructed what appears to be a recreational facility." Vex's secondary eyes twitched. Define recreational facility. The main screen displayed Marcus's campsite, which had somehow evolved from a simple overnight shelter into something resembling a small resort. There were multiple structures built from local materials, what appeared to be a water purification system using volcanic heat, and something that looked suspiciously like a swimming pool. A swimming pool filled with creatures that should have been apex predators. "He's teaching them synchronized swimming," Krull added helpfully. On the screen, Marcus stood waist-deep in the pool, apparently coaching a group of void hunters through some sort of aquatic routine. The creatures, whose razor-sharp fins had been known to slice through battleship hulls, were moving in perfect formation while Marcus called out instructions. "Left turn, guys. Remember, grace and power. Hedda, you are lagging behind the group, and 5, 6, 7, 8. I need a vacation." Vex muttered. "Sir, you are on vacation. This is a surveillance mission." This is torture disguised as a surveillance mission. The torture was about to get worse. The communication array crackled to life, and Marcus's voice filled the command center with its usual insufferable cheerfulness. "Good morning, Sky friends. Hope you enjoyed the show yesterday. Today I'm planning something special. Ever heard of a barbecue?" Vex's mandibles clicked ominously. "Please tell me he's not planning to cook something." 20 minutes later they had their answer. Marcus had apparently decided that what Morthanis Prime really needed was a social gathering. He'd constructed what humans called a grill using volcanic rock and mineral deposits, and was now sending out invitations to every dangerous life form within a 50-kilometer radius. "How is he sending invitations?" Krull asked, watching as various creatures began converging on Marcus's location. "Pheromone markers," Vex replied, reading the sensor data with growing horror. "They somehow learned to communicate using the planet's natural chemical signaling system. That should be impossible. Those pheromone patterns are species-specific and incredibly complex. Lieutenant, in the past 3 cycles, we have watched this human violate so many laws of biology that I'm starting to question whether our science textbooks were written by complete idiots." On the screen, Marcus was preparing what appeared to be food for roughly 30 different species, each with completely different dietary requirements. Some were carnivores, some were herbivores, some consumed minerals, and at least 3 were energy-based life forms that shouldn't have been able to eat physical matter at all. Marcus, however, seemed to have figured out a menu that worked for everyone. "What is that?" Vex pointed at something Marcus was preparing that seemed to be glowing. According to the molecular scanner, it's crystallized photons seasoned with trace amounts of rare earth elements and what appears to be barbecue sauce. "Barbecue sauce?" "Yes, sir. Crystallized photons." "That would be correct, sir." Vex made a note to himself to have the ship's medical officer examine his sanity levels. This couldn't be real. Reality didn't work this way. But apparently on Mortanis Prime, reality was whatever Marcus Vale decided it should be. The barbecue party was, by any reasonable measure, a complete success. Creatures that had spent millions of years trying to eat each other were now sitting around Marcus's fire pit, sharing food and making what could only be described as small talk. A pack of phase stalkers was playing some sort of card game with a group of crystal mites, while the acid serpent had apparently appointed itself as the party's DJ, using its natural sound-producing abilities to provide background music. "Sir," Crawler's voice carried a note of barely controlled hysteria. "The nightmare crawlers are line dancing." They were indeed. 6 creatures of pure shadow and nightmare were performing what appeared to be a perfectly choreographed routine to the acid serpent's musical accompaniment. Marcus was providing enthusiastic commentary from the sidelines. "That's it, guys. Feel the rhythm. You are doing great." "I'm putting in for a transfer," Vex announced. "Sir, you can't transfer in the middle of a mission. Watch me. I'm going to request assignment to a nice quiet black hole somewhere. Something peaceful and predictable." That's when the alarm started blaring. "Contact approaching from Vector 77 Mark IV, reported Ensign Kral 3 from the sensor station. "Multiple vessels. Unknown configuration." Vex's attention snapped back to his duties. On screen, the display shifted to show space around Mortanis Prime, where 3 sleek ships had just dropped out of hyperspace. The configuration was unfamiliar, but the energy signatures were definitely hostile. Gorthak raiders, Kral identified after a moment. 3 heavy cruisers. Full battle configuration. The Gorthaks were one of the more unpleasant species in this sector of the galaxy. Violent, aggressive, and with a particular fondness for enslaving primitive civilizations. They must have detected the unusual activity on Mortanis Prime and decided to investigate. "Sir, should we inform the human?" Vex considered this. On one hand, Marcus Vale was a single individual on a planet's surface, armed with nothing more than standard camping equipment and an apparent death wish. On the other hand, he was a human, and humans had a distressing tendency to respond to overwhelming odds with enthusiastic violence. Negative. Let's see how this plays out. The Gorthak ships took up orbital positions around Mortanis Prime and began scanning the surface. It didn't take them long to locate Marcus's barbecue party, which was probably showing up on their sensors as a massive thermal anomaly surrounded by biological signatures that shouldn't exist. "Incoming transmission from the lead Gorthak vessel," Kral reported. "Put it through." The communication screen filled with the distinctly unpleasant visage of a Gorthak war commander. The species looked like someone had crossed a crocodile with a tank and then given the result anger management issues. "Primitive surface dweller," the Gorthak snarled, apparently addressing Marcus directly. "You will surrender immediately. Your world now belongs to the Gorthak Empire." Down on the planet's surface, Marcus looked up from where he was serving what appeared to be grilled energy crystals to a group of shadow rippers. "Oh, hey there," he called out, waving cheerfully at the sky. "You guys want to join the party? There's plenty of food." The Gorthak commander's expression shifted from arrogant to confused. "What?" I said. "Do you want to join the party? I have got enough food for everyone. Fair warning, though, the local wildlife is a bit shy around strangers. You might want to bring gifts." "Gifts?" "Yeah, something to show you are friendly. Maybe some music, games? The nightmare crawlers are really into line dancing right now, but I think they'd be open to learning new routines." Vex watched the exchange with fascination. The Gorthak commander was clearly having trouble processing the idea that his intimidating demand for surrender had been met with an invitation to a social gathering. "You dare mock the Gorthak Empire?" the commander roared. "Mock? No, I'm serious about the party. Look, I get it. You are probably tired from traveling. Space can be exhausting. Why don't you come down, grab a bite to eat, maybe pet some of the local fauna? I have got this really friendly acid serpent that loves meeting new people." The Gorthak ships began descending toward the planet's surface, weapons charging. This was clearly not going according to their usual conquest protocols. "Sir," Tal whispered, "should we intervene?" "Not yet," Vex replied. "I want to see what happens when an unstoppable force meets an immovable object with a complete disregard for physics." The first Gorthak lander touched down roughly 2 kilometers from Marcus's party site. The landing was deliberately aggressive, designed to intimidate local populations with displays of military power. 30 Gorthak warriors emerged from the craft, armed with energy weapons and wearing full battle armor. Marcus, apparently oblivious to the implied threat, started walking toward them with a plate of food in each hand. "Welcome to Mortanis Prime. he called out cheerfully. "Hope you guys are hungry." The Gorthak formation advanced in standard battle order, weapons raised and ready. Their leader, a massive warrior whose armor was decorated with the bones of his victims, stepped forward to deliver what was obviously meant to be an intimidating speech. "Primitive, fool, you will kneel before the might of—" His words were cut off as Marcus thrust a plate of food into his hands. "Here, try this. It's grilled quantum mass with a light seasoning of pulverized meteor dust." The phase stalkers helped me with the recipe. The Gorthak warrior stared at the plate, then at Marcus, then back at the plate. His massive brain was clearly struggling to process this turn of events. What? "Oh, and this is for your friend there," Marcus continued, handing the second plate to another warrior. "Crystallized plasma with a honey glaze." "Well, it's not exactly honey, it's more like concentrated sunshine, but it tastes similar." The entire Gorthak landing party stood frozen, weapons still raised but completely forgotten. They'd prepared for battle, for resistance, for desperate pleas for mercy. They had not prepared for hospitality. "Sir," one of the warriors said uncertainly, "what are your orders?" The commander looked down at his plate of food, then at Marcus, who was already heading back toward the party to fetch more refreshments. "I don't know. Maybe we should try the food," another warrior suggested. "It could be poisoned. Does he look like he's trying to poison us?" They all turned to watch Marcus, who was now introducing a group of void hunters to the concept of party games. The creatures were apparently attempting to play something called musical chairs, despite not having chairs and existing in a state of quantum uncertainty. "He looks insane," the commander concluded. "Yes, sir, but in a friendly way." That's when things got really interesting. One of the younger Gorthak warriors, apparently deciding that the food smelled better than their usual military rations, took a tentative bite of the crystallized plasma. His eyes widened. "Commander, this is really good." "Don't be ridiculous. Primitive species can't possibly—" The commander's protest died as he caught a whiff of the grilled quantum moss. Against his better judgment, he took a small bite. "Oh," he said quietly. "Oh my." Within minutes, the entire Gorthak landing party had abandoned their weapons in favor of Marcus's cooking. They were soon seated around the fire pit, sharing war stories with the acid serpent and learning the finer points of synchronized swimming from the void hunters. "Sir," Krala's voice was now completely deadpan, "the Gorthak commander appears to be braiding flowers into his battle armor." "I can see that, Lieutenant. The flowers are carnivorous." "Of course they are." Up on the second Gorthak ship, the remaining commanders were having a heated discussion about what to do with their mysteriously pacified landing party. "Send down another team," ordered Sub-Commander Grex 4. "Full heavy weapons. Kill everything that moves." "Sir," the communications officer interrupted, "we are receiving a transmission from the surface." "Put it through." Marcus's voice filled the bridge, carrying its usual note of cheerful enthusiasm.
"Hey, ship number 2. Your friends down here are having a great time. We are teaching them to make friendship bracelets out of living crystal. Want to join us?"
"Friendship bracelets," Rex repeated. "Yeah, it's a human tradition. You make jewelry for your friends to show that you care about them. The Shadow Reppers are really getting into it. Turns out they are surprisingly artistic for creatures made of pure nightmare." Rex looked at his tactical display, which showed his advance team sitting in a circle around a campfire, apparently engaged in arts and crafts with creatures that should have dissolved them on contact. "This is impossible," he muttered. "Nothing's impossible," Marcus replied cheerfully. "That's what my drill sergeant used to say." Well, actually what he said was, "Velae, you are impossibly stupid, but I prefer my interpretation." "Sir," the weapons officer reported, "the first commander is requesting permission to extend shore leave." "Shore leave? We are in the middle of a conquest." He says the quantum mass has given him a new perspective on life. "Sir," Rex stared at his displays for a long moment. 3 options presented themselves. He could order orbital bombardment and destroy everything on the planet's surface, including his own troops. He could send down more forces and risk losing them to whatever impossible weirdness was happening down there. Or he could go down personally and figure out what in the void was going on. Being a Gorthak, he naturally chose the most violent option. "Prepare the orbital cannons," he ordered. "We will sterilize the entire area." "Sir," his tactical officer said quietly, "our forces are still on the surface. Acceptable losses." That's when Marcus's voice crackled through the comm system again. "Oh, and guys, you might want to hold off on the orbital bombardment thing. I know you are probably thinking about it, but the local wildlife gets really cranky when their habitat is threatened. Trust me, you don't want to see a cranky Mortani stalker." Rex paused. "How does he know what we are thinking?" "Humans are weird like that," Marcus continued conversationally. "Plus, your tactical officer is probably right about your people on the ground. I have gotten pretty attached to them. Commander Throck makes excellent campfire stories, and Lieutenant Vex has surprising skill with interpretive dance." "My name is Grax," the tactical officer corrected automatically. "Oh, sorry, Lieutenant Grax. Anyway, why don't you come down and we will talk about this over dinner? I'm making something special tonight. Roasted meteor fragments with a side of liquefied starlight." Grex looked around his bridge. His crew was staring at him with expressions of barely contained curiosity. Even his most hardened warriors seemed intrigued by the idea of liquefied starlight. "This is madness," he announced. "Sir," his communications officer said hopefully, "it does sound delicious." 20 minutes later, Grex found himself sitting on the surface of Mortanis Prime, watching his elite warriors participate in what appeared to be an impromptu talent show. Commander Thrak was indeed telling stories, while Lieutenant Grax had somehow been convinced to perform what Marcus called interpretive dance with a group of crystalline entities that existed in 7 dimensions simultaneously. "How?" Grex asked Marcus, who was preparing something that smelled like heaven and looked like concentrated rainbow. "How is any of this possible?" Marcus shrugged, stirring his concoction with a spoon made from compressed gravity. "Practice, mostly. Plus, I spent a lot of time in Australia. After you have survived a drop bear attack, everything else seems pretty manageable." "What's a drop bear?" "Imagine a koala, but bigger, more aggressive, and with a taste for human flesh. They drop out of trees onto unsuspecting tourists." Rex considered this. "That sounds terrifying." "Oh, they are adorable once you get to know them. I had one as a pet for a while. Called him Steve." The Gorthak sub-commander looked around at his warriors, who were now engaged in various recreational activities with creatures that should have been killing them. "My species has conquered 14 star systems," he said slowly. "We are feared across 3 galactic sectors." "That's nice," Marcus said, offering him a bowl of what appeared to be edible music. "It must keep you busy. Me, I prefer the simple life, good food, interesting neighbors, and plenty of fresh air. Try this. It's a new recipe." Rex took a tentative sip and felt his entire worldview shift. The liquid tasted like victory, but peaceful victory, like winning a war through friendship instead of violence. "What is this?" he whispered. "Concentrated contentment with a hint of vanilla. The nightmare crawlers taught me how to make it. Turns out they are really good at emotional cooking." Up in orbit, the crews of the remaining Gorthak ships watched their chain of command gradually disappear into what appeared to be an increasingly elaborate cultural exchange program. By the end of the day, Sub-Commander Grex was teaching a group of Shadow Rippers the traditional Gorthak war chant, while the creatures responded with their own interpretive movement piece about the futility of aggression. "Sir," the communications officer on the 3rd ship reported to Commander Rex Prime, "we are receiving requests from all surface teams to extend their deployment indefinitely." "On what grounds?" "They say they are learning valuable lessons about alternative conflict resolution, sir." Rex Prime looked at his tactical displays, which showed that his entire invasion force had essentially gone native in the space of 6 hours. "Alternative conflict resolution?" "Yes, sir. Also, they have requested additional supplies. Specifically, they want arts and crafts materials and something called marshmallows for making what the human calls s'mores." "S'mores." "Apparently it's a traditional human campfire food, sir. They say it pairs well with existential discussions about the nature of friendship." Rex Prime stared out at the planet below, where his fearsome Gorthak warriors were probably sitting around a campfire, making friendship bracelets and discussing their feelings with creatures that could dissolve them with a thought. "Sir," his tactical officer said quietly, "perhaps we should investigate personally." "Absolutely not," Rex declared. "We are maintaining orbital position and waiting for reinforcements." "Sir, respectfully, what are reinforcements going to do that 3 full battle groups couldn't?" Rex considered this. The question had merit. His forces hadn't been defeated in battle, they'd been defeated by hospitality. How do you fight an enemy who responds to invasion by offering you dinner and teaching you to dance? Sir, the communications officer interrupted, we are receiving another transmission from the surface. Don't put it through. It's not from the humans, sir. It's from Commander Thrake. Rex hesitated, then nodded. On screen, the display showed his most decorated warrior, a Gorthak who had personally conquered 4 planets and never shown mercy to an enemy. He was wearing what appeared to be a crown made of living flowers and had somehow acquired a tank. Rex! Thorak called out cheerfully, you have to come down here. Marcus is teaching us to surf. Surf? Yeah, apparently you can ride the gravitational waves caused by the planet's triple moon system. It's like flying, but more fun. In the background, Rex could see several of his warriors gliding through the air on what appeared to be pieces of crystallized space-time, whooping with joy as they rode invisible waves of gravity. Track, Rex said carefully, what happened to your mission parameters? Mission parameters? Oh, right. The invasion thing. Yeah, we voted on it. You voted? Democratic process. Very human concept. We decided that conquering this place would be a waste of time. I mean, why would you want to own paradise? That's just greedy. Rex felt something snap in his brain. Paradise? It's a death world. Only if you approach it wrong, Thrak explained patiently. Marcus says the secret is to treat it with respect. Oh, and to always carry snacks. The locals appreciate snacks. The transmission ended, leaving Rex staring at a blank screen while his bridge crew murmured among themselves about the philosophical implications of respecting death worlds. Sir, his science officer said eventually, perhaps we should consider the possibility that our intelligence reports were incomplete. Incomplete? How? Well, they focused entirely on the hostile aspects of the planetary ecosystem. They didn't mention anything about the possibility of peaceful coexistence. Because peaceful coexistence with a Class 5 death world is impossible. Apparently not for humans, sir. Rex looked out at Mortanis Prime, where his invasion force was probably learning to make jewelry out of compressed starlight while discussing the philosophical implications of interspecies friendship. Helm, he ordered finally, set course for home. Sir? We are leaving. If High Command wants to conquer a human nature preserve, they can send someone else. What about our forces on the surface? Rex considered this. His warriors were clearly happy where they were, having apparently discovered that there were alternatives to violence as a means of conflict resolution. We will leave them, he decided. Call it a cultural exchange program. As the last Gorthak ship disappeared into hyperspace, Commander Vex-9 finally allowed himself to relax. The crisis was over, resolved not through superior firepower or brilliant tactics, but through the simple expedient of a human who thought apex predators made good dinner guests. Sir, Krala said, what do we report to High Command? Vex looked at his screens, which showed Marcus Vale teaching a group of former Gorthak warriors to make flower crowns while riding gravity waves with creatures that existed in multiple dimensions. We report, he said slowly, that Mortanis Prime has been successfully pacified by Terran forces. Recommend against further intervention. And the human appears to have established a functioning diplomatic mission with all relevant local authorities. I suggest we leave him alone. On the planet's surface, Marcus looked up at the stars where he knew the alien observers were watching. He raised a hand in a casual wave, then returned to his newest project, teaching his collection of interdimensional friends how to play volleyball using a ball made of compressed time. Thanks for watching out for us, he called to the sky. Feel free to stop by any time. There's always room for one more at the campfire. In the command center of the Catherian observation ship, Vex-9 made a final note in his log. Subject continues to violate known laws of physics, biology, and common sense. Recommend long-term observation from a safe distance. Also request transfer to any available posting that does not involve humans, death worlds, or impossible friendship dynamics. The war was over before it began, ended not with violence, but with a radical human concept that everything was better with friends, food, and a willingness to try new things. Marcus Vale had turned a punishment posting into paradise, a death world into a nature preserve, and a potential interstellar incident into the galaxy's most unusual diplomatic success story. And he was still humming,